And joining us on the line, I think you got it right, Larry, a moment ago when you described her as a fan favorite. She's our favorite, KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst. Good morning, KT.
Good morning.
All right, so listen to this soundbite from Marie Harf, the person who is responsible for explaining our Iranian negotiations to the American people. And it's based on this New York Times story that came out that said, hey, in the midst of all these negotiations, the Iranians have increased their stockpiles of enriched uranium by 20%. How was that possible? Here's what Marie Harf had to say.
Under the JPOA, Iran can fluctuate its numbers in terms of the stockpile. They can go up and down. As long as at the end of a fixed date, they are back down below a number. So in the first two instances, the JPOA and the extension, that's exactly what they've done. They've gone up, they've gone back down, and at the end of it, they've been where they need to be. And we fully expect that will happen again.
Well, and so the question is, you know, do we trust the Iranians to be doing the right thing here? Are they, and if we had full knowledge of this, what in the world were we thinking about?
Yeah, you know, I go back to what Reagan said. Reagan, one of the biggest hawks of all time, who said about the arms control agreements, the arms reduction agreements he reached with the Soviet Union, which were historic. He said, trust, but verify. This gives you even more evidence that you need not trust. And the problem with this is, if you can't trust them and you can't verify it, what good is this deal? When the State Department spokesman says, you know, we're totally surprised, we're perplexed, we don't get it, that makes me even more nervous. Because if they didn't see this coming, if they didn't know what was happening, how can we trust the other things that they're negotiating with the Iranians? It's like the 13th chime of a clock, incredible in and of itself, and calls into question everything which preceded it.
I might have this wrong, but my reading of what they're perplexed about is that the New York Times thought it was interesting that they had increased. We knew this. We knew this was all part of the deal. They're allowed to do this. And if that's the way we went,
the deal we're getting,
yeah.
What a deal.
Yeah.
Look, if the deal has to be verifiable and it has to be enforceable, and obviously it has to be constitutional, I don't think it meets any of those three criteria. Why do I not think it's enforceable? The Iranians have said, we're not going to allow any time, any place inspections, and we probably don't even want to let you into our military bases to inspect. Well, if that's the case, that's not a verifiable agreement. You can't tell if they're cheating. Secondly, unenforceable. If on day one all the sanctions are lifted, if Iran gets its equivalent of a signing bonus on day one, when all of the assets are unfrozen, estimates are that's anywhere from 60 to 120 billion with a B dollars, what incentive does Iran have to continue the deal? If they get everything they want up front, if they get all the payment up front, and if, say, on day one they get that, day two, everybody rushes to sign contracts with Iranian companies to do business. What about day three, day four? Iran either cheats, which you don't know it's going to cheat, and secondly decides, we really don't care about this agreement that much. We got everything we wanted. So then it's unverifiable. And people say, well, the alternative to this deal is war. No, it's not. The alternative to this deal is a better deal. Or the alternative to this deal is do what Reagan did with the Soviet Union. Push for regime change. Make the situation so uncomfortable for the mullahs that the 80% of the population that's under the age of 30 and wants to be westernized, overthrow the mullahs or make the mullahs change if they want to stay in power. I think, the mullahs aren't going to change unless they realize it's either their nukes or their necks.
I got to ask you, KT McFarland, about one of the biggest international stories of the past week, and that is the scandal at FIFA. Mm-hmm. And we had another chapter in that story yesterday as the president of FIFA, after winning re-election, he decided yesterday to step down. I think his name is Stepladder. That's how Sepp Blatter, but I like to call him Stepladder. It just sounds better. There's a lot of corruption.
Blatter sounds better.
I guess not. There's a lot of corruption at FIFA, and there's charges of bribery. There's charges of extortion. How is this making America look in the international stage? Because it's our Justice Department that blew the whistle on this and started these proceedings. Are we seen as a hero around the world, or are some countries really angry that we're doing this?
Well, Moscow's particularly angry, and Moscow, Putin particularly personally, they're paranoid. And so they'll see this as some grand conspiracy for the Americans to take away, the World Soccer Cup from Russia. The same way they see Ukraine as a grand Western American conspiracy to rip Mother Russia apart and to take Ukraine into the arms of the West and away from the happy arms of Russia. So, I think it'll be a mixed blessing while we do this. But corruption in sports, say it ain't so, Joe. I mean, it's a tragedy when you think that what's supposed to be something we all celebrate, that's nonpartisan, that's non-political, that's just on the merit of human endeavor and achievement and effort, that somehow that's been corrupted.
But the fact is, most people of the world probably spend more time focusing on their soccer than they focus on their own governments and politics, rightly or wrongly. If America is there a major downside with our esteem around the world if we're seen as messing up that organization, or on the other side, is it good for us to be saving that organization?
It's not finished yet. I mean, what happens next?
Yeah.
Does it get cleaned up, and if so, what? And does the sport continue, and does the World Cup continue? As far as America's position around the world, when President Obama comes out and says we're in better shape, we're respected by more countries, we're loved by more countries than when I took office, he's starting to sound like Baghdad Bob.
Huh. All right. So yesterday, the Senate passed the USA Freedom Act, which replaced the recently lapsed Patriot Act. In my mind, it's like a dime's worth of difference. But what do you think? Is there a real improvement here in letting the phone companies hold these records?
Well, we'll see. Do the phone company cooperate with the government if the government wants them? I mean, I think that what we ought to have done with this whole thing was to say, let's rethink this whole problem. When the Patriot Act was passed, we didn't have a lot of alternate ways of finding bad guys other than, phone tracking, cell phone tracking, roving wiretaps. Technology has changed. We now have software and social media you can find bad guys in other ways. The other thing is, if it's a problem with the FISA court that it takes too long, you have to wake the judge up in the middle of the night, what's wrong with putting the FISA court on a 24/7 schedule, and you have the FISA court judge sitting right next to the guy who's tracking the terrorists? I mean, to me, it all got very politicized. When if you just put a couple of people in a room to say, okay, now how do we guarantee American privacy in the face of Snowden, and at the same time solve our problem? And our problem is tracking terrorists. And the third thing I would say is, we're still beating our heads against the wall and taking all of these resources, and we're looking at the whole world and 350 million Americans the same way. How about using metadata analytics to carve out the 98% of the American people who we don't care who they're talking to, and then use that data to then focus on that very small percentage of the people who are either terrorists, who are vulnerable to being recruited, or people that we need to take a second look at.
Katie McFarland, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.